Good morning and welcome to another weather segment here for our the theme of the forecast, though. I think the real is one of transition, and I guess more than that, we're going to have a taste of fall here coming up over the next couple days, and we're going to really notice the change of seasons here. Before I start with that, though, and I thank you, Asan, for a great talk here this morning. I wanted to mention, and I just added this here a second ago. One of the pieces that you talked about in regard to what is needed for capacity. Uh, the soils obviously are the critical ones, but another one you might wonder what's the chance or what's a reasonable value for my location for the most precipitation I can get in an hour or in a day, and some of those numbers that are needed, and what does the environment actually suggest given climatology. This is a site that comes in really handy for that, and you can get that. Again, it's off the web. I will add this site as soon as I finish up here on the chat. But it's the NOAA Atlas 14. And the last thing about that is that thankfully NOAA is actually updating this. And within the next maybe year or so, maybe a little longer, but there will be a new Atlas 15 that looks at this question of what is the most I can expect. And it not only gives you the most, but it gives you some statistics on what you typically see in a given year versus what you see once every 10 years, et cetera. Very, very useful, but it's directly relevant to this topic that Asan's talked about with drainage and how much rainfall at my location can I expect. In Michigan, generally, the heaviest amounts are in the far southern lower peninsula, and they decrease somewhat as you go northward. That's the general spatial pattern across Michigan, but this particular site will actually give you a value that you can use or at least consider in that discussion. Okay, let's move on to review here the last week. It was for most, and we had a little bit of a transition in temperatures from warmer than normal to cooler than normal. But when you take that on the far left here, altogether, very close to normal in most locations, a couple degrees below normal, the western upper, to a degree or two above normal down in the far southern lower. So, but close overall, even though we went from much above to below normal here and had some really cool temperatures. The precipitation during the week, though, and this continues a trend we've seen over the last couple of weeks in much of the state. And in the middle here, you can see that there were many areas. Most of the state had less than a quarter of an inch for the entire week. So definitely another drier than normal week. And in some cases, that's been trend has been in place for several weeks now. On the far right-hand side here, you can see that there's a lot of browns and sort of orange colors here, indicating for at least the last month some deficits in precipitation. So that is an interesting trend. We've had a very wet season, and certainly down in portions of southern and eastern lower Michigan, but it has dried out in most areas here. Certainly become drier over the last couple of weeks. And that trend, that's another theme in the forecast as we look ahead, that is expected to continue. So the drier than normal pattern that we're in right now likely will continue. Degree day totals with the near normal temperatures here, not much of an earth-shattering movement, but our current totals right now as of early September from about 1,500, and this is the corn 8650 cutoff. Degree day units here from the beginning of May from about 1,500 in the far north to about 2,500 in the far south. And just like we've seen virtually the whole season, some minor deficits in terms of degree day accumulation for the season on the right-hand side in northern, let's call it western and central upper Michigan, but surpluses over much of lower Michigan, and some down near the southern border are actually significant, maybe 100 to 150 units ahead of where we typically are at this time of the year. So for much of the state, we have had, because of those surpluses, we've had an advanced phenology or rates of growth and development for many of our crops. A lot of that goes back to earlier in the season, but that surplus is still there as we speak, and almost certainly will be there at the end of the growing season as that occurs over the next few weeks. Our forecast, as I mentioned, is pretty straightforward, but I'm showing a couple of maps here. But the big news is down here in the middle. This is these are forecast upper air jet stream patterns here for the next 5 days. And what is clearly evident here, obvious here, and this is the meteorology 101, but we've got a big trough. On its actually it's moving into the region as we speak right now, and it's expected to be over the region for the next several days. There's a ridge out west, and again, most of you remember and appreciate that those ridges are associated with abnormally or usually warmer and drier than normal conditions if you're underneath that, and the troughs, well, certainly cooler than normal, but it can be wetter than normal too under the troughs. But the big news is here is that this trough, as it moves in, is going to pull down Canadian air or Canadian origin air masses into the upper Midwest and lead to at least a real taste of fall weather for the next several days. And that's the upper left here. These are mean temperature departures from normal for the next 5 days. All the blues are below normal, and that's a really it's almost a given. You can see warmer than normal out west, but for the Great Lakes region, including Michigan, significantly much cooler than normal temperatures expected. And on the right, upper right hand, those are precipitation totals also expected to be relatively dry with that northwesterly flow off. So big changes coming, although today will be a day of transition. This is the map as of 8 o'clock this morning. With that trough, as it develops, it's going to drag a cold front, and it's a fairly strong cold front here that's just entering western upper Michigan as we speak. That's going to go through over the next 24 hours, and that is the major weather system for the next whole week. It's certainly the most significant chance for precip that we have for the upcoming week, which will be likely drier than normal, but most of the precipitation here, any that's expected, is going to be falling over the next 24 to 36 hours. And lower left-hand side here, you can see that there are already showers and thunder showers here moving. This line is gradually moving to the east and south. The individual cells in there, the individual showers and thunder showers, are actually moving more northeast. But this line will slowly make its way through the state here during the day today, into the overnight hours, and into tomorrow. Here's the map as of 8 p.m. tonight. You can see the front making it down to portions of northern and central lower. That's the blue line there with the teeth. With showers and thunder showers, that line gradually progressing to the south and east. Here's tomorrow morning, and we expect the front probably to clear the southeastern corner of the state by late morning. That's sort of the time frame we're talking about. So for most locations, we'll be looking probably at a couple-hour period of occasional showers, maybe a couple embedded rumbles of thunder. We're not expecting any severe weather with this, basically just garden variety showers. Most areas will pick up some precip, but it will be somewhat limited. There's not a lot of moisture for this system to work with. And so I think in most spots, we're talking generic quarter of an inch. There might be a few spots that do better than that, but this is not a heavy rain, probably, again, about a quarter of an inch, but a little bit of a drink, especially in those areas that have been dry for much of the last week. And of course, it depends on your application, what you're interested in. The dryness has been great for some crops and field work, et cetera, but it is getting a little dry on the top layers of soil, depending on, again, location and the soil. So the quarter of an inch might be useful in some cases, but that's probably going to be, again, the upper end of what we see for the next 24 hours. By Saturday morning here, 8 a.m., the front is gone by, and these blue H's here, that's a Canadian origin air mass, and it's going to be noticeably, and I use the word in my summary, sharply, at this first time of the season, sharply cooler than it has been. So today we will be looking at our warmest day of the week for much of the state except for the far north, but highs up there only in the upper 60s. That'll be mostly behind that front as it makes its way southeast. But in the southern part of the state, we may see some mid, even maybe a couple of upper 80s. But that will be, again, ahead of the colder air. This will be the warmest day of the month, or the warmest day of the week. Sorry, getting too far ahead of myself. And then cooler air filtering in after that. So by the time we get to Saturday here, we'll be looking at highs only in the 50s and maybe even some low 60s, where I struggle to get out of the 50s. So much cooler. And since the lake temperatures or the water temperatures in the Great Lakes are still in the 60s and even some low 70s, we will see lots of instability, lots of lake effect cloudiness, and probably some lake effect showers, especially northern parts of the state during the day on Saturday. Those will linger into Sunday. Nothing major though, just but clouds, breezy northwest winds, much cooler, but very fall-like, especially compared to what we'll see today. We actually made the executive decision in the Andreessen household here. Saturday will be our first pot of chili for football day officially, given the change in weather that's expected. But so it will be noticeably different, and it's a sign of the change of seasons here coming up. Now, beyond that, what happens? Well, that high pressure moves off to the east and is beginning even late Sunday and into early next week. We move into some moderation and we should see a rebound in temperature. So it is expected to be generally fair and dry for the early half or the half of next week, first half, with gradually moderating temperatures. We should be back up into the 70s again by Monday and maybe up to 80 by Wednesday. So some moderation is expected next week, but still dry. That's so the precipitation totals here, looking at the upcoming week, generally less than a quarter of an inch or less, drier than normal. And that's a fairly good bet. A little bit higher than that in upper Michigan, the upper peninsula here, but most of the states seeing less than or expect less than a quarter of an inch. Water demand, our potential evapotranspiration rates here, given the much cooler temperatures, will be reduced, and so we'll see probably, even though there'll be some increase in those rates for early next week, given sunny and dry, fair conditions, the overall totals for the week on the average will be a little bit below normal, 0.11 to 0.15 inches per day. That's the reference potential rate each day averaged over the upcoming week, and that's a little lower than what we typically see for early September. Where are we headed beyond that? Well, the similar message in the medium range. Both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks here that we have been consistent and calling for a noticeable, but it's limited, but still a shift of that ridging feature that's been out over Western North America further into the central part of the country. As that happens, we should see our temperatures gradually increase back to above normal levels. That's one of the messages. The other really important one is the precip, and that is with that upper air pattern that we see on the left-hand side here, very strong likelihood of continued drier than normal. So right now, it's looking like the first half of the month, we will see cool weather this weekend, but that will gradually moderate back to warmer than normal, likely at least by the middle of the month, but the drier than normal pattern does continue. And I think that's one of the things you can probably have fairly high confidence in if you're looking ahead. The adjusted or modified monthly outlook, this is for the whole month of September collectively. It follows directly what you just saw. And it calls for normal to above normal mean temperatures for the month, but also for drier than normal conditions. So that warm and dry direction certainly is probably where we're headed for much of the next few weeks. And even beyond that, the outlooks beyond that, looking into the later fall, still also call for warmer than normal temperatures as well. So summarizing here quickly, a transitional type of weather pattern and big changes over the course of the day today, with that rains gradually spreading south and east from the upper peninsula across the lower peninsula. But then cold air moves in, sort of a early fall type of weekend, but then better moderation, fair and dry and warmer for next week. And with that, we've got a special presentation here this morning, and I'm going to hand it back to Phil for that. Thanks.